Now we will see a lab on excessive data exposure. Excessive data exposure occurs when an API responds with more data than required by the requesting application. This can happen due to a misconfiguration or programming error, which causes the API to reveal sensitive information. Attackers can exploit this vulnerability by sending multiple requests to the API and using the extra data to carry out further attacks. For example, if an API returns user data such as email addresses or passwords, an attacker could use this information to attempt to gain unauthorized access to the system. The impact of excessive data exposure can have serious consequences for an organization. It can lead to the exposure of sensitive information such as customer data or trade secrets, which can damage the organization's reputation and lead to legal or regulatory consequences. In addition, it can provide attackers with a valuable information that they can use to carry out further attacks on the organization. To mitigate the risk of excessive data exposure in APIs, organizations should implement the best practices. Use access control to restrict API to authorized users only. Implement rate limiting to prevent excessive requests from a single user or IP address. Use encryption to protect sensitive data in transit at rest. Implement data making to hide sensitive data from unauthorized user. Regularly monitoring API logs to detect and respond to suspicious activity. So excessive data exposure is a serious vulnerability that can have significant consequences. It is essential to prioritize API security to ensure that data is exchanged safely and securely between different applications. By implementing the best practices outlined above, organizations can reduce the risk of this vulnerability and better protect their sensitive data. The application. Design Deck is a web-based design collaboration platform for startup, corporation, and design agency. Alice, who works for the digital agency, using Design Deck's online platform to store and share design mock-ups with her clients. The attacker. So Bob, a malicious attacker is tasked by a third party to hack Alice's Design Deck account and steal her client's proprietary design files and business documents. Forgotten password functionality. Bob, who is a registered user of a Design Deck platform, begins by testing the application password reset functionality by submitting his email address below. Now we have to intercept the request. To understand how the password reset functionality communicates with the backend server, Bob intercepts the HTTP request generated by his browser using an application web proxy. A web proxy is a software debugging tool that enables web developer to view and modify raw HTTP and HTTPS requests between their machine and a remote web application. This may include HTTP, HTTPS request and response data, request variables and parameters, headers, etc. Upon clicking the request reset link button, Bob's browser generated a post request, passing email as a parameter within his email, bob@livemail.com as its value. Now we have to review the response. Let's further analyze the HTTP response intercepted by Bob's web proxy for additional parameters or response variables sent by the remote server. Interesting. Analyzing the HTTP response, we can see the design date slash API slash forgot password API endpoint is returning more data than it should, including the password reset token and other sensitive data. That sensitive information is associated with Bob DesignDex account. Now I have to reset the password of Alice's account. Having noticed this odd behavior in DesignDex forgotten password mechanism, Bob submits Alice's email address to see if he can potentially access her password reset token and hijack her DesignDex account. So as Bob, I will go ahead and copy the email address into the form field and click request link to continue. Now see, success. By simply submitting Alice's email address in DesignDex password reset form and intercepting the HTTP response, Bob has successfully managed to access Alice's password reset token URL. To check if the password reset token URL can be used to reset Alice's account, I attempt to submit the following reset token in this browser. As Bob, I will go ahead and load the password reset link URL in the browser. See, account takeover. So having submitted Alice's leaked password token URL, Bob means I has me have me managed to load the password reset page, thereby allowing him to successfully change Alice's account credential and hijack her design deck account. The vulnerability exploited by Bob is also known as excessive data exposure attack, in which the affected API may expose or return a lot more data than what the client legitimately needs, relying on the client to do the filtering of the data. However, by intercepting the API response via web proxy or debugging tools, attackers can expose sensitive data, which may include sensitive tokens, password hashes, etc. So this is the vulnerable code. To understand why DesignDex/API/forget password API endpoint returns excessive data, let's examine its source code for processing a password reset. The handle password reset link function method is used to create a reset password link and send that link to the email address of the user. First, it extracts the mail parameter from the post request body and stores it into the email variable. Next, it checks if the user with such an email exists. If the email is valid, the reset password link is being generated via generate reset link for method and sent to the provided email. However, notice that the generated data by the generate reset link for method is also added to the HTTP response object, leaking the sensitive data, such as username, last login date, and most importantly, the reset password account token to the attacker. Additionally, if provided email address is not registered in the system, the handle password reset link method responds with a bad request HTTP status, leaking the information about user with such email being registered in the system or not. In order to effectively mitigate against excessive data exposure of data in APIs, developers must ensure to never rely on the client side to filter sensitive data. This can be achieved by making sure that each API endpoint only responds with the data which is essential for the endpoint's purpose and does not leak any other data. So let's see how the above best practices can be applied to our vulnerable code example to prevent excessive data exposure attacks. In the mitigated example, we again use the generate recent link for method to generate the reset password link and send it to the provided email. However, this time we don't include this data in the HTTP response. Instead, we can only include the message which should be rendered in the browser. Additionally, we use the same message and HTTP response status even if the provided email is not valid, making it impossible to guess whether a user with such email exists in the system. These measures prevent the API endpoint from leaking sensitive data.